Snow had teeth that night. It chewed at my bare toes, gnawed through my thin boots, and bit straight into the bones of my ankles as I curled tighter on the crooked bench at the crossroads. The wooden shelter did little to stop the wind. It slipped beneath my cloak like icy fingers, prying at my ribs, searching for whatever was left of my heart. I had nothing else left to lose. My former mate's words still rang in my skull, loud as if he stood beside me. Barren, useless, shame, each one a stone he had packed into my chest before shoving me out into the dark. I had walked until my legs shook, until the village lights vanished, until the path blurred beneath the snow and I could no longer tell where the road ended and the emptiness began. I almost lay down right there, ready to let the cold finish what he started. Then the ground began to tremble. Hooves thundered through the storm. A huge shadow emerged from the white-black leather, iron plates, long dark braids lashed with frost. Two small cloaked figures clung to his sides. The man's eyes found me at once, bright and sharp as a wolf's. "You will freeze if you stay there," he said, voice low, carrying easily over the wind. I did not move. Omegas alone at night learn not to trust any male who stops. He stepped closer, studying the torn hem of my gown, the bruises circling my wrist, the way I clutched my satchel like it was all that kept me from falling apart. Then, without a word, he unclasped his cloak. Heavy fur and wool slid from his shoulders, still warm from his body, smelling of pine, smoke, and something wild that woke a sleeping part of me. He held it out. "I am not here to hurt you," he murmured. "I know what it looks like when someone has been thrown away." Our gazes locked. For a heartbeat, the storm went silent. "I am Michael," he said, "Alpha King of these lands. Those are my pups. They need someone to stay. And you," his eyes dipped to my shaking hands, "need somewhere to be wanted. Come with me, Omega. Or stay, and let the snow claim what he discarded." My throat burned. I thought of the house I no longer had, of the empty cradle that never held a child, of the way my pack had turned their faces away as I was driven out. The word barren echoed once more, then faded beneath another word that rose quietly in its place. Choose. On trembling legs, I stood. I did not take his hand. But when he turned his back and started toward the great dark shape of his horse, I stepped off the bench and followed the Alpha King into the storm. The mountain rose out of the night like the spine of some sleeping beast, all jagged teeth and dark ridges cutting into the sky. Torches burned along the carved path that wound up its side, tiny points of gold against the black, and each step the horse took seemed to carry me farther from the life I had known, and deeper into a world I did not understand. I sat behind Michael's broad back, his cloak wrapped around me, my cheek pressed to the thick fur at his shoulders. The children rode double on another horse, small forms bundled in furs, their silhouettes swaying gently with the animal's gait. No one spoke, only the creak of leather, the jingle of harness, and the low, distant howl of wolves followed us up the mountain. When we reached the outer wall, it loomed over me, towering stone, rough-hewn and ancient, crowned with battlements and watchfires. Iron-bound gates groaned open at our approach. Guards stepped aside, bowing their heads, eyes fixed on the frozen earth rather than their king. I felt their gazes flicker toward me anyway, quick, curious, then gone, like they feared being caught staring. We passed under the archway and into the courtyard. Snow lay in shallow drifts against the walls, trampled in the center, where men drilled by day. Now it was nearly silent, only a few warriors crossing from barracks to hall, their cloaks snapping in the wind. Every one of them stopped and bowed when Michael dismounted. No one bowed to me. Why would they? I slid awkwardly from the saddle, my legs shaking, boots slipping slightly on the packed snow. Michael's hand hovered near my elbow, close enough to catch me if I fell but not quite touching. The restraint made my chest ache more than if he'd simply grabbed me. "Inside," he said quietly. "You are half ice already." The main doors of the keep were carved with running wolves and crescent moons, the wood darkened by age and weather. When they opened, a wave of warmth washed over me, thick, smoky air, and the faint smell of roasting meat. My frozen fingers stung as the blood began to move again. Torches lined the entryway, their light licking across stone walls, fur banners, and old shields hung like ghosts of past battles. This was not a house. It was a fortress. Warriors stood at intervals along the hall, hands resting near their blades. Some were scarred, some young, all sharp-eyed. When Michael strode past, they bowed their heads in unison. A ripple of deference followed him like a shadow. I stayed 2 steps behind, clutching my satchel against my chest. my heart beating so hard it felt like it might bruise my ribs from the inside. The children padded between us. The little boy, small, round-cheeked, curls, trying to escape the fur hat pulled low on his head, kept glancing back at me. I tried to smile. It probably looked more like a grimace. The girl walked closer to Michael's side, fingers wrapped in the edge of his cloak. She was thin and quiet, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her face. She didn't look back at all. Near the end of the hall, a woman appeared from a side doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. She was of middle years, sturdy, with a stern mouth and sharp, assessing eyes. A strip of white threaded through her dark braid, and flour clung to her sleeves. "Rosa," Michael said. His voice softened by a degree I might not have noticed if I had not been listening so hard. "This is Talia. She will be staying." Rosa's gaze swept over me from head to toe, the frayed hem of my gown, the tired set of my shoulders, the ring of old bruises on my wrist. It was not the cruel appraisal of my old pack, weighing what value could still be wrung from me. It was more measuring, as if she were deciding how much of me needed mending. "Welcome, then," she said at last. Her tone held no warmth, but no disdain either. "You look like you could use food, a fire, and a bed." My throat tightened. I managed a small nod. Michael gestured toward the corridor that curved away from the main hall. "Rosa will show you to your chamber," he said. "You will rest tonight. Tomorrow you will meet with me, and we will speak of arrangements." The pause around the last word made heat crawl up my neck. Arrangements. Such a simple term for the fact that I had arrived here with no coin, no name worth speaking, and no right to ask for anything. "Yes, my king," I murmured automatically, then flinched at myself. Old habits. Something flickered across his face, a quick shadow. "Do not call me that when we are alone," he said, voice low. "Michael is enough." I almost asked, "For you or for me?" But Rosa was already turning, and I followed. The corridor narrowed as we climbed a curving stair. Stone steps echoed under our feet. Torches spat and hissed, sending dripping wax down iron brackets. Doors lined the hallway above, thick wood with iron latches. I wondered which ones hid more warriors, which ones hid noble guests, which ones hid rooms that had once belonged to the queen whose place I would never, could never, take. Rosa stopped at a door near the far end. "This will be yours," she said, pushing it open. Warmth met me first. A small fire burned in the hearth, logs crackling softly. The room was not large, but to me it might as well have been a palace. A bed stood against the far wall, piled with furs and linen so clean they almost glowed. A simple chest sat at its foot. A narrow window overlooked the dark valley below, frost feathering its edges. A wash basin and pitcher rested on a small table, alongside a folded robe of soft wool. I stepped inside slowly, afraid the vision would vanish if I moved too quickly. "There is a bolt on the inside," Rosa said, nodding toward the door. "It works. No one enters without your leave." I stared at the iron bolt, solid, sturdy, on my side of the door. In my old house, the lock had always been on his side. Cold pricked my eyes more sharply than any winter wind. "Thank you," I whispered. Rosa studied me for another heartbeat, then gave a brief nod, as if I had passed some invisible test. "Clean clothes are on the chest. The bathwater will not stay warm long, so do not linger too much, no matter how tempting. If you are hungry, there is bread by the hearth." I only then noticed the small loaf resting on a plate near the fire, steam still rising from its cracked top. "You may sleep as late as you need," she added, turning to go. At the doorway, she paused. "The little one the boy will likely try to sneak in at dawn. He does that with anyone he decides is his." A ghost of a smile touched her mouth. "You may send him away if you wish." My answer came without thought. "I will not." She nodded once more and left, closing the door behind her. The soft click of the latch sounded louder than it should have. For a moment, I simply stood there, every muscle locked. Then I reached back and slid the bolt into place. The weight of it settling into its cradle echoed through my bones. Safe. The word felt dangerous, fragile. I did not trust it, but I wanted to. I crossed to the bed and pressed my palm to the coverlet. It yielded beneath my hand. Soft and thick. Nothing like the thin, scratchy blanket back in my old house. I remember nights spent lying awake, counting the cracks in the ceiling while my husband's snores filled the dark, pain twisting low in my belly, failure heavy on my chest. Now there was only the crackle of fire, the whisper of wind against the window. My own breath. I washed in the basin, the warm water stinging my chilled skin. Dirt and old tears streaked down my arms. When I slipped into the wool robe, it brushed my body like an unfamiliar kindness. I ate the bread in small bites, savoring every crumb, jaw tight with the effort not to sob over something so simple. Finally, I lay down. The mattress cradled me. The furs were heavy, cocooning me in warmth. My fingers sought the small silver ring on its thong around my neck. My mother's, the only thing I had managed to keep. I closed my fist around it and stared up at the shadowed beams overhead. Grief came first, hot and blinding. For the pups I had never held. For the girl I once was, dreaming of a mate who would look at her the way Michael looked at his children. For the home that had been taken from me without a word of protest from those who should have defended me. But beneath the grief, something else stirred. Relief. I was not under his roof anymore. His hands would never touch me again. His words could no longer echo through the walls, telling me what I was worth. I was far above that life now, in a keep built of stone and old power, with a bolt on the inside and an alpha king who had placed his own cloak on my shoulders. Tears slid into my hair, silent and endless. I pressed the ring to my lips, inhaled the faint, familiar scent of metal and skin, and let myself cry until the knots inside my chest began, just barely, to loosen. Sometime in the deep of night, when the fire had burned low, a soft sound brushed my ears, a hesitant shuffle near the door, a small hand testing the latch. The bolt held. There was a pause, then a quiet sigh, tiny and disappointed. "Tomorrow," I whispered into the dark, though no one could hear me. "You can come tomorrow." The words wrapped around me like another layer of fur. For the first time in longer than I could remember, sleep came without nightmares pulling at its edges. The boy kept his promise. At dawn, when the pale light was only just beginning to press against the frost-rimmed window, I heard the soft scrape at my door again. This time, I was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with my mother's ring turning between my fingers. The bolt slid back with a quiet clink. The little wolf tumbled in before I could say, "Come." He stopped short when he saw I was dressed, his curls wild, his tunic crooked, sleep still clinging to his eyes. "Oh," he breathed, as if he had hoped to find some sort of dream instead. "You are real." I did not know whether to laugh or cry at that. By the time the sun climbed fully over the mountains, a pattern had begun to weave itself around us. I learned that the boy's name was Leo, and that he spoke in streams, all questions and declarations. The girl was Mira, older by 3 years, and she spoke in almost nothing at all. At breakfast, Leo sat so close our shoulders touched, dipping his bread into my soup when he thought I was not looking. Mira kept to the far end of the table, her gaze fixed on her plate, but I felt her eyes flicker to me whenever I refilled Leo's cup or cut his meat into smaller pieces. "Eat," I told them both, voice as gentle as I could make it. "Wolves cannot run on air." Leo giggled and obeyed. Mira's fork paused, then moved again. Days folded one into another like the pages of an old book. I found myself learning small, vital things. That Leo hated cold porridge but would eat anything dipped in honey. That Mira's hands shook when thunder rolled over the mountains. That both of them slept badly. Their rest shredded by nightmares that left them pale and hollow-eyed at breakfast. That first night, when Leo's thin wail split the dark, I moved before I could think. My feet found the corridor on their own, following the sound to a door half open. The fire in their chamber had burned low. Shadows crawled along the walls. Leo writhed in his small bed, fists knotted in the blankets, breath hitching on sobs. Mira sat on her own pallet, knees pulled to her chest, watching him with the frozen stare of someone who has seen too much and can do nothing. I did not touch him at once. I knelt beside the bed and spoke softly, the way my mother once did when my own nightmares had teeth. "Leo," I murmured. "Little wolf, you are safe. Wake up." He jerked, eyes flying open, wild and unfocused. For a heartbeat, he did not see me. Then his gaze locked onto my face, and the terror in it broke into fresh sobs. "Fire," he hiccuped. "They took her. The blood." My chest clenched. I did not ask who he meant. Instead, I held out my arms. "Come here," I said. He launched himself into me with such force we nearly toppled sideways. His small body shook against mine, his tears soaking my nightdress. I rocked him slowly, back and forth, like a boat on a quiet river, and began to hum the lullaby my mother used to sing. Nothing grand, just a simple melody about the moon watching over sleeping wolves. Mira watched, eyes huge and glistening. After a while, She slid from her pallet and inched closer, inch by inch, until her shoulder brushed my arm. I did not move or speak. I only shifted enough to make a space between us. She hesitated, then tucked herself into that gap, her forehead pressing lightly to my upper arm. We stayed like that until Leo's breathing evened, his weight growing heavy in my lap. Mira's lashes drooped. When both children finally sagged into sleep, I did not lay them down. I simply leaned against the bed frame, holding them, my back aching and my legs numb, and stared at the dancing shadows on the wall. I did not sleep. But I was not tired. After that, the nights belonged to us. Sometimes it was Mira who cried out, her voice cracking on a name. I would sit on the edge of her bed and braid her hair with clumsy fingers, humming until her trembling eased. Sometimes Leo would shuffle into my chamber silently, clutching his blanket, and crawl under my furs without a word. I would wake with a small, warm foot pressed against my ribs and his curls tickling my chin. By day, the keep watched. Warriors pretended not to notice when Leo slipped his hand into mine as we walked the corridors, his little legs trotting to match my stride. Servants found reasons to pass by the hearth where Mira sat sketching, their eyes lingering on the way her rigid shoulders had begun to loosen. Even Rosa, who carried her worry like armor, stopped frowning quite so deeply when she saw the children eat without being begged. Michael saw everything. He rarely entered the room while we were gathered, as if one step too close might shatter whatever fragile magic held us. Instead, he lingered in doorways, half in shadow, watching as Leo climbed into my lap with a book, as Mira edged nearer on the bench, until she eventually sat close enough that our sleeves brushed. The first time Mira's fingers slipped into mine, small, hesitant, almost an accident, we both froze. Her eyes darted to my face, wide and uncertain. I held my breath. Then I curled my fingers around hers, gently but firmly, as if I were catching a frightened bird that had decided, just this once, to land. "Thank you for the picture," I said quietly. She flushed, gaze dropping. That morning, I had found a scrap of parchment pushed under my door, bearing the clumsy yet careful drawing of a wolf with 3 smaller wolves at its side, all standing beneath a crescent moon. "You saw it," she whispered. "Of course I did. I keep it in my chest, where I put important things." Her hand tightened on mine. From the doorway, Michael's shoulders eased, just enough for me to see. It was several nights before he and I found ourselves alone in the same room. I had gone to the kitchen for water. Sleep would not come. My thoughts felt too large for the bed. The hallways were dim and quiet, most of the fires banked. The kitchen, however, still held a lingering warmth. Glowing coals smoldered in the hearth, casting a red-gold light over the wooden tables and hanging bundles of herbs. Michael sat at the far end of one table, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, a cup cradled in his hand. He had not lit a torch. The only illumination came from the embers and the faint spill from the corridor. For a moment, I considered retreating, but he had already turned his head toward the door. An alpha always knew when someone stepped into his space. "Could not sleep?" he asked. His voice was softer than it had been on the road, less iron and more worn leather. I shook my head, moving toward the stove. "No." He rose, took a second cup from the shelf, and poured from a pot that steamed gently over the coals. The scent of spiced wine and cinnamon curled through the air. "It helps sometimes," he said, holding the cup out. "Takes the edge off the thoughts." Our fingers almost brushed as I took it. Almost. That almost felt louder than contact. We sat opposite each other at the long table, the space between us strewn with stray crumbs and the faint, lingering marks of past meals. For a while, we said nothing. The warmth of the drink slid down my throat, pooling in my empty stomach like a small, bright sun. "You have done more for them in a handful of days than others have managed in years," he said finally, without looking at me. I stared into my cup. "All I did was hold them when they cried." His jaw tightened. "No one held them the night their mother died, least of all me." The confession dropped between us like a stone into deep water. I lifted my gaze. He spoke slowly, as if forcing each word through a narrow space. "I was at the border, dealing with a challenge from the Eastern Pax. I should have been here. If I had been, perhaps," he broke off, thumb rubbing the edge of his cup. "The ambush was meant for me. They struck the wrong carriage." The pups watched the light go out of her eyes while my warriors dragged me away from my own battle. Guilt coiled around his shoulders like chains. His tattoos caught the glow of the coals, shifting with the flecks of muscle beneath. "They blame you?" I asked, my voice barely more than breath. "No." His mouth twisted. That would be easier. They worship me. They think I can stop anything. I taught them to believe that, then proved myself a liar in the one moment it mattered most. Something in the honesty of that hurt cut straight through the old fear inside me. I knew that flavor of guilt, believing that your mere existence had caused the worst thing that ever happened. You could not have been in both places, I said. You are their father, but you are not the moon. You cannot pull tides and blood both at once. A rough exhale slipped from him. Half laugh, half broken thing. Tell that to the ghosts that sit on my chest at night, he murmured. We fell quiet again. The air between us thickened, not with awkwardness, but with something heavier, like the moment before a wolf shifts, when the skin feels too tight and the bones know a change is coming. I remembered Leo's small body shaking in my arms, Mira's fingers gripping mine like she feared I might dissolve into smoke. I remembered Michael in the doorway, watching with eyes that looked almost hungry, not for flesh, for peace. They do not need a god, I said slowly. They need a father who sits with them when they scream, even if he cannot chase the monsters away. His gaze snapped to mine. For the first time, there was no king there. No alpha. Just a man who had lost too much and did not know how to forgive himself. And what do you need, Talia? He asked quietly. The sound of my name in his mouth did something dangerous to my ribcage. I swallowed, fingers tightening around the warm cup. To believe I am more than my failures, I admitted. I do not know how to do that yet. The corner of his mouth lifted, not in mockery, but in something like recognition. Perhaps, he said, we might learn together. The words hung between us, soft and terrifying. I looked away first, because if I did not, I might have reached across the table and traced the line of his throat with my fingertips, just to see if the pulse there stuttered like mine. Instead, I took another sip of wine, feeling its heat bloom in my chest. Thank you, I murmured. For what? His voice was rough. For the room, for the bread, for trusting me with them. He shook his head. You have that backward, Omega. They are the ones who chose you. A pause. I am merely wise enough not to stand in their way. Our eyes met again, and this time neither of us looked away quickly. The kitchen seemed to shrink around us, the world narrowing to the arc of his lashes, the tension in his jaw, the way his hand flexed on the table as if restraining itself. Unspoken things crowded the air, questions, wants, fears. The bond between our wolves stirred, a low, insistent hum under my skin. I broke the spell with a small, shaky laugh. If I do not sleep soon, Leo will find me face down in my porridge, I said. A faint smile ghosted across his lips. Go then, he replied. Before he decides my lap is a suitable replacement. I rose, the bench scraping softly. For a heartbeat, I thought he might stand too, walk me back through the dark corridor, stand outside my door like a silent guardian. He did not. But as I reached the doorway, his voice followed me, warm and low. Talia. I turned. If the nightmares come, he said, you may come here as well. The kitchen, the fire. You do not have to face them alone. The offer settled over me like another cloak. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. In my chamber, the bed felt less like a stranger. When I slid beneath the furs, I could still taste the spice of the wine and hear his confession echoing inside my bones. Somewhere down the hall, two pups slept a little easier. Somewhere beneath the mountain, an alpha king sat alone by a dying fire, cradling his guilt. And for the first time, thin and fragile as a thread of spider silk, something new stretched between us, a line of trust, trembling but unbroken, binding our bruised hearts in the same quiet, uncertain weave. Rumors travel faster than wolves. I learned this on a gray morning when the sky hung low over the mountains and the air tasted of snow that had not yet fallen. Rosa was kneading dough at the kitchen table, her hands moving with the steady rhythm of long habit, when one of the scouts came in, shook the snow from his cloak, and leaned in to murmur something in her ear. Her fingers stilled for the first time since I had known her. Our eyes met. The scout's gaze flicked toward me, then away, as if looking too long might burn. Go on, Rosa said tightly, sending him out with a jerk of her chin. She wiped her hands on her apron and busied herself with the fire instead, as if it suddenly required all of her attention. What is it? I asked. Nothing for you to worry about, she said, which, of course, meant it was exactly something for me to worry about. By midday, the keep hummed with a strange, brittle energy. Warriors spoke in hushed tones along the corridors. Servants moved faster than usual, eyes sliding over me before snapping back to their work. Even the pups sensed it. Leo chattered less, his laughter snagging on invisible thorns. Mira watched the adults with wary, shuttered eyes, her shoulders slowly climbing toward her ears. I heard the first whisper in the laundry room. 2 younger maids were folding linens, talking just low enough to think they could not be overheard. Said she was cast out, one murmured. No pups after years. What if the moon truly has closed her womb? Hush, the other hissed. If the king hears you, he should hear. He is Alpha. He must think of heirs, not some broken Omega with sad eyes. The sheet slipped from my numb fingers. They spun, faces blanching when they realized I stood in the doorway, arms full of folded tunics. For a heartbeat, we stared at each other, their shame and my humiliation tangled in the space between us. I did not mean, one stammered. It is all right, I said, though it was not. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. People will say worse. Their silence followed me down the corridor like a shadow. By evening, the whispers had grown teeth. Rosa slammed pots louder than necessary, muttering under her breath about fools and cowards. I caught snatches when she thought I was not listening. Never their fault, always the woman's. Never mind the bruises or the nights she spent bleeding while he drank. Is it about me? I asked, finally, when we were alone. She did not pretend otherwise. Rosa was not built for lies. Your old pack knows you are here, she said flatly. Word reached them through traitors. Your former husband is not pleased. My stomach lurched. How? He says you are his, she cut in. That you ran from your rightful place. That you bewitched our king with your tragic story and your empty womb. Her mouth twisted around the last words, as if they tasted foul. For a moment, all I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears. He cannot call me his, I whispered. He threw me out. Men like that never see it that way, Rosa said grimly. They toss you aside, then howl when anyone else dares to see value where they saw nothing. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles ached. What does the council say? She hesitated, and that hesitation was worse than any answer. They say the North needs heirs, she admitted. They say the Alpha King cannot tie himself to a bond that may never bear pups. Reckless. As if loving me would be an act of war against reason. That night, Michael did not appear in the kitchen. I waited longer than I should have, hands wrapped around an untouched cup of warmed wine. The coals burned low. The memory of his confession, the guilt in his eyes, the way his voice had gone rough around the word ghosts lingered in the silence. At last, I extinguished the lamps and went to bed alone, the emptiness at my side feeling sharper than any blade. The next day, I saw him in the great hall. He stood at the far end, speaking with 3 elders from the council, all gray-furred and stiff-backed, their cloaks heavy with old power. Their voices carried, whether they intended them to or not. Cannot ignore the line, one elder said. The North is held by strength, yes, but also by blood. Your father knew this, your grandfather. And you think I do not? Michael's tone was quiet, but it cut through the air like steel. The packs are fed. Our borders are safe. My children are cared for. What more do you demand? A future, another elder replied. One secured by an heir from strong stock. Take a proper mate, Alpha. One who can guarantee the line. Not a cast-off Omega whose own pack deemed her unfit. Heat scorched my cheeks. I froze in the shadow of a pillar, hidden by hanging furs, yet every word struck like an open-handed blow. Michael's jaw worked. You presume much, he said. We speak only what others whisper, the elder insisted. They say your judgment is clouded, that this woman has bewitched you, that you risk all we have built for. Enough, Michael snarled. The sound vibrated through the stone. The elders fell silent, but their expressions did not soften. It is our duty to counsel you, one said more carefully, not as enemies, as those who have seen kings fall because they could not set aside their hearts when the realm demanded it. Michael's shoulders rose and fell once, slowly, as if he were restraining himself from ripping out throats. Leave, he said. We will speak again when you remember the difference between counsel and insult. They bowed, stiff and slow, and turned away. I shrank back as they passed, heart hammering, praying they would not scent my presence. Their footsteps faded down the hall. Michael remained where he was, head tipped back, eyes closed. For a moment, all his edges dropped. He looked older, tired, the weight of crown and grief and expectation dragging at his bones. I almost stepped out. Almost. Instead, fear wrapped its hands around my ribs and pulled me backward. I slipped down a side passage like a ghost, shame prickling under my skin. After that, something shifted. Michael was still kind. He still nodded when our paths crossed, still asked, "Are you well?" in that deep, steady voice. But he did not linger. He no longer hovered in the doorway when I read to the pups by the fire. He answered their questions, ruffled Leo's curls, pressed his lips briefly to Mira's hair, then found some excuse to leave a report to read, a border dispute, anything that kept him away from the sight of me with his children curled against my sides. At meals, his gaze skated over me and away, as if meeting my eyes would set flame to dry tinder. When our fingers brushed in passing a cup exchanged, a cloak taken from my shoulders, he flinched, almost imperceptibly, like a man touching a hot iron by mistake. The bond between our wolves did not care for distance. It tugged at me in quiet moments. I would be plaiting Mira's hair, and suddenly feel the sharp ache of his mood agitation, fury, self-loathing like a distant storm pressing against my skull. I would be kneading dough with Rosa, and my breath would hitch for no reason I could name, only to hear later that Michael had spent the morning listening to the council circle him like carrion birds. One evening, Leo clambered into my lap in the great hall, clutching his wooden wolf. "Father is angry," he announced matter-of-factly, peering up at me. "He smells like storms." "Storms pass," I said, smoothing his curls. "Yes, but they leave mud," he said with the brutal honesty of children. He does not laugh anymore. I looked up. Michael stood at the far side of the hall, speaking with Vin and a cluster of scouts. His mouth was a hard line. The torches carved shadows under his eyes, making them look darker, deeper. As if feeling my gaze, he turned. For a heartbeat, we simply stared at each other. The air between us tightened, thin and sharp as a drawn bowstring. My pulse stumbled. His eyes dropped to where Leo sat, sprawled over my lap, then to Mira pressed against my side, her sketchbook open. Something in his expression flickered. Pain, longing, fear, all tangled together. He looked away first. The string snapped. That night, lying in my bed, I listened to the wind howl around the keep and wondered if I had made a mistake by staying. Perhaps the elders were right. Perhaps attaching myself to the Alpha King was nothing but selfishness dressed as bravery. He had kingdoms to consider, war to deter, a legacy to secure, and I was a woman whose body had failed at its simplest task. A woman whose very presence stirred conflict, a woman who had brought rumors and accusations into his halls simply by existing under his roof. I pressed my palm flat against my belly, feeling nothing but the softness of skin and the faint, old ache of remembered loss. "What if they are right?" I whispered into the dark. "What if I am a burden you cannot afford?" No one answered, but somewhere in the keep, a wolf howled once, low and ragged, the sound closer to a broken heart than a battle cry. The first warning came with the horns. 3 short blasts rolled through the keep, low and sharp, rattling the dishes in the kitchen and the bones in my chest. Rosa froze mid-stir, ladled dripping stew back into the pot. "Riders," she said. "Not ours." My stomach clenched. I wiped my hands on my apron, suddenly aware of the flour on my skin, the warmth of the hearth at my back, the 2 children at the table. Leo was stacking bread crusts into a crooked tower. Mira was sketching quietly, her charcoal moving in soft strokes across the parchment. Both of them looked up at the horns, then at me. "Stay here," Rosa told them, her voice clipped but steady. "To me," she added, in a lower tone, "do not go to the hall. Not until we know who it is." We both knew I would go anyway. I hesitated just long enough to press a kiss to Leo's hair and squeeze Mira's shoulder. Then I left the kitchen, my heart already racing ahead of me through the corridors. The great hall doors stood open. Cold air knifed in, carrying the smell of snow and horse and something sour, fear or anger, or both. Warriors lined the walls. The council elders clustered near the dais, their faces turned toward the center of the room. And there, standing on the stone like he owned it, was the man I had once called husband. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not in height or breadth, his shoulders were still broad. His posture still held that familiar, arrogant tilt, but something in him seemed shrunken, hollowed. His hair was tied back too tightly, pulling at the skin of his temples. His eyes, once the center of my world, now looked like chips of dull stone. "Talia," he said when he saw me. My feet stopped as if he had tugged an invisible leash. For a heartbeat, I was back in that cramped house, back in that narrow bed, back in the kitchen where the sound of his boots on the floorboards meant I should make myself smaller, quieter, easier to ignore. Old instinct surged up, hot and nauseating. My shoulders wanted to fold, My head wanted to duck, but Leo's hand had rested in mine this morning. Mira's drawing 4 wolves beneath a crescent moon waited under my pillow. Michael's voice from the kitchen nights ago whispered in my ears. You do not have to face them alone. I lifted my chin. Why are you here? My voice shook, but it did not break. He laughed, a short, humorless sound. Why am I here? I am here for my wife. A murmur slid through the gathered wolves. Michael stood at the dais, a step below his throne, arms folded across his chest. His face was carved from ice. Only his eyes betrayed him, dark, intent, locked on me with a focus that burned. You threw me out, I said. He spread his hands, feigning wounded innocence. We quarreled. You ran. That is all. That is not all, I whispered. The elders turned toward me, eyes sharp. Rosa had slipped in through a side door, her apron dusted with flour, her jaw clenched. Vin hovered near the wall, gaze flicking between Michael and my former mate, weighing distances, angles, the odds of violence. I claim what is mine, my ex-mate announced, looking up at the Alpha King as if he were no more than an obstacle. This Omega, she is bound to me. Your hospitality has gone on long enough. Send her back where she belongs. Blood roared in my ears. My hands curled at my sides. Belongs. At his heel, in his house, under his rules. Back to being the shadow that cooked and bled and smiled on command. Michael's voice cut through the noise. She is under my protection, he said. You will watch your tongue in my hall. How noble, my ex sneered. The mighty Alpha King, sheltering another pack's cast off. Tell me, does she whimper prettily for you too? Or have you not noticed yet that her womb is as empty as her promise? The words hit like a slap. Heat rushed to my face. Shame and rage tangled so tightly I could hardly breathe. The elders shifted, some averting their eyes, some watching me with cool curiosity, as if I were a specimen on a table instead of a person with skin that still remembered every bruise. Michael took a step down from the dais. Choose your next words carefully, he said. His voice was low, almost calm. That calm was the most dangerous thing in the room. My ex lifted his chin, sensing victory in the tension. What? Will you tear out my throat for speaking truth? He asked. She is barren. She failed me. She will fail you. Her place is mine to decide, not yours, not hers. The last 2 words landed like stones. Everyone looked at me then. Not at Michael, not at the council, not at the bristling warriors. At me. That was new. I felt my body trying to fold inward, to make myself small, invisible, safe. If I stayed quiet, perhaps Michael would handle it. He was king. His rank could crush my ex-mate where he stood. I could let him. All I had to do was stay silent. But Leo's voice echoed in my mind. He does not laugh anymore. And Rosa's. They toss you aside, then howl when anyone else dares to see value where they saw nothing. If I let them speak for me now, I would never forgive myself. My legs moved before my mind finished arguing. I stepped forward, away from the shadows near the door, out into the open space of the hall. The stones felt cold under my thin soles. Talia, Michael said sharply. I did not look at him. I was afraid that if I saw his eyes, I would falter. I will speak, I said. My voice carried farther than I expected. You have all spoken about me as if I am not here. As if my body, my life, are a problem to be solved by those who were not present when it broke. A rustle swept through the crowd. My ex barked a laugh. Listen to this, he said. My quiet little wife has learned to bare her teeth. Yes, I said. You taught me. Every time you bared yours. He went still. I took another step forward. My hands shook, so I laced my fingers together to hide it. You want truth? I asked the hall. Here is truth. I lost our first pup in the 3rd month. I bled for days. He told me to clean it up before it stained the floor. A murmur, sharper this time. The 2nd. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out, came later. I woke to blood soaking the bed. I begged him to fetch the healer. He said it was not worth the coin. Faces shifted. A warrior near the wall looked away, jaw flexing. I lay on the floor, I continued, while he ate his supper. When it was over, he told me my body had failed him, that I had failed him. He called me cursed, useless, unworthy of his name, and when no more pups quickened, he made sure everyone knew it was my fault alone. My ex's face had turned an ugly mottled red. Do not listen to her, he snapped. She twists. You threw me into the snow, I said, cutting him off. The memory rose, vivid and sharp, the slam of the door, the sting of cold air on my wet face. You put my satchel in my hands and shut the door on my back. If I am yours, why did you not lock me inside? Why did you not chase me, if I had run? You cannot cast something away and then claim it when someone else sees worth in what you discarded. The hall had gone very quiet. Michael stood a few paces away now, hands hanging at his sides. I noticed, with a strange clarity, that they trembled. He was holding himself in check for me. An elder cleared his throat. These are grave accusations, he said. They are small pieces of a grave life, I replied. My ex sneered, grasping at the last weapon he had. She is barren, he said again, voice rising. Whatever else she says, that is still true. Ask any healer. Her womb is a dead field. What use is such a woman to a king, to a realm? I expected laughter. Agreement. The weight of their gaze turning on me again, heavy with scorn. Instead, I saw something else. Pity. Yes, but also anger. Not at me. At him. One of the warriors near the wall spoke up, voice rough. A field does not choose the stones thrown into it, he said. Or the storms that flatten the seedlings. A murmur of assent. Rosa stepped forward from the crowd before I could blink. Her eyes were bright, her jaw set. I nursed Talia when she came here half frozen, she said. I saw the scars on her back, the old bruises on her arms, the way she flinched when a man raised his hand too quickly. You do not get marks like that from grief alone. My ex spun toward her. You dare. Yes, she snapped. I dare. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly. For the first time, I felt the weight in the room tilt. The elders were no longer looking at me as a problem. They were looking at him as evidence. Evidence of what entitlement and cruelty looked like when dragged into the light. Michael took one more step, now close enough that I could feel the heat of his body at my back. Talia, he said quietly, so only I would hear. Say the word, and I will end this. I knew he meant it. I could feel it in the way his wolf paced just beneath his skin, in the tight set of his shoulders, in the low rumble that vibrated through him like distant thunder. One nod from me, and he would tear my ex-mate's throat out in front of the entire council. No one would dare to stop him. Power like that was intoxicating. It was also a trap. If I let Michael speak for me now, it would confirm every whisper that I had bewitched him, that he was no longer thinking clearly, that I was a weakness in his armor. I turned, just enough to meet his eyes. Let me finish, I said. His jaw clenched. Slowly, he inclined his head. It was a small thing. It was everything. I faced my ex-mate again. You say I am barren, I said. Perhaps the moon has closed my womb. Perhaps not. That is between me and the goddess, not you. What I know is this. I am more than the children I lost. I am more than the blood I shed on your floor. I am more than the names you used to carve yourself taller while standing on my back. I drew a breath that felt like it scraped my lungs clean. You do not own me, I said. And this time, my voice did not shake at all. Not my body, not my story, not my future. You had the chance to be my mate. You chose to be my jailer instead. The bond you speak of died the night you threw me into the snow. Silence. Then, quietly, Rosa said, well spoken. Someone else murmured, agreement. The sound spread, low and growing, like a tide. My ex looked around, suddenly realizing the room was no longer with him. His bravado faltered. This is nonsense, he snapped. The law, one of the elders interrupted, recognizes cruelty as breaking of the bond when witnessed and declared. He looked at me. For the first time, respect softened the hard lines of his face. You have declared, he said. We have witnessed. My ex sputtered. You cannot. Michael moved then. He did not lunge. He did not bare his teeth. He simply stepped up beside me, shoulder to shoulder, and let his presence fill the space like a storm rolling over a field. You heard her, he said to the hall. To the council. To the man who had once held my life in his hands. The bond is broken. She is not yours. She is under my protection. Any who say otherwise insult not only her, but me. His hand brushed mine, just once, fingers trembling. I laced my fingers through his without thinking. A hiss went through the hall, not scandalized, but sharp, like the sound air makes when it rushes in to fill a vacuum. My ex took an involuntary step back. You will regret this, he spat. Both of you. The moon sees. Yes, Michael said softly. She does. Guards moved in at a subtle nod from him, flanking my former husband. They did not touch him, but the message was clear. His time here was finished. As they led him away, he twisted to look at me one last time, eyes wild. You think he will keep you? He snarled. Wait until he tires of your empty. Michael's growl cut him off, deep and warning. The guards hurried him through the doors. They slammed shut behind him with a boom that echoed in my bones. The hall exhaled. I realized then that I had been holding my breath for what felt like hours. My knees wobbled. Michael's grip on my hand tightened, steadying me. Talia, he murmured, low enough that only I could hear. If you wish to leave this hall, I am not running, I said. He searched my face, as if looking for cracks. You stood, he said. It sounded like a marvel, like a prayer. I swallowed, my throat raw. You let me. The edges of his mouth softened. For a heartbeat, his hand lifted, as if he might touch my cheek. He stopped himself, fingers curling into a fist instead. Around us, the council watched, the pack watched, the whole great hall holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. For once, I did not care. My voice had filled this room. My truth had bent its air. I had seen my pain reflected in other faces, not as a stain on my worth, but as a mark against the man who put it there. For the first time, I realized the shame I had carried all these years had never belonged to me. It belonged to him. I let that knowledge settle over me like a cloak, heavier and warmer than any fur. Whatever came next, the council's judgments, the pack's whispers, the moon's verdict, I had already done the hardest thing. I had chosen to stand. The moon sat heavy over the clearing, a silver coin pressed into a sky of black velvet. Wolves ringed the sacred circle, alphas and betas, scouts and elders, pack after pack gathered in a wide, watchful ring. Torches burned at intervals, their flames bowing under the night wind. The scent of fur, smoke, and tension hung thick. Every eye was turned toward the raised stone at the center, where I stood between two lives. My former mate was already there. He wore his best leathers, his shoulders squared as if for a celebration instead of a reckoning. A smug smile tugged at his mouth when I stepped up, Michael at my side. See? My ex said loudly, his voice carrying. She comes when I call. Our bond holds. He reached for my wrist, as if to prove it. Before his fingers could touch me, a low rumble shivered through the ground. Michael moved not fast, not violent, just one step forward, his presence slamming between us like a wall. You will not lay hands on her, he said. The council elder to our left lifted a hand. Enough. The moon witnesses tonight. Words, not claws, will decide this. Michael's jaw flexed. I felt his wolf pacing just under his skin, furious at being leashed. My own wolf trembled in my chest, torn between fear and something fiercer. The law is clear, another elder intoned. A bond may be broken by death, by mutual release, or by the repeated cruelty of one mate, declared and witnessed beneath the moon. Tonight, we confirm what claim remains. My ex smiled, all teeth. There is no need for this, he said. I claim my Omega. She is mine. The word mine slithered over my skin like old chains. He turned to the gathered packs, spreading his arms. She is confused. The Alpha King has filled her head with grand ideas, but the bond between us stands. The moon does not care for her temper or for his pity. She is bound to me. I will take her home and... Michael's growl cut across his speech, low and dangerous. Be very careful, he warned, eyes dark as storm clouds. The elder stepped between them. Alpha, he said to Michael. This is not your decision to make. Michael stared at him, incredulous. He abused her, he said, voice raw. He cast her into the snow. You heard her, you witnessed. Yes, the elder agreed. And still, the last thread must be cut by the one who was bound. Not by the king, not by the council. His gaze shifted to me. By her, the world narrowed, torches blurred at the edges of my vision. The murmur of the crowd faded to a low roar, like distant waves. The moon above us seemed to swell, filling the sky, its light pouring over my face until my eyes watered. Talia, my ex said, softening his voice in a way that once would have made me flinch and apologize. Enough of this spectacle. Come back. We can put these embarrassments behind us. I will forgive your little performance at the keep. Forgive. As if he were the wronged one. My fingers curled into my palms. Nails bit skin. Beside me, Michael was very still. Too still. I knew that stillness now. It was the thin edge between control and carnage. He could have stepped forward and ended this with a single command, a single challenge. Every instinct in him screamed to do so. I could feel it through the thin thread of whatever lay between us, humming in my bones. Instead, he did something no one expected. Not even me. He turned away from my ex and faced me. Then he lowered his head, bent his knees, and sank to the ground. The Alpha King knelt. Gasps rippled through the gathered wolves. Some actually stepped back, as if struck. Alphas did not kneel. Not to anyone. Yet he did not to the council, not to the moon, but to me. Firelight gilded the planes of his face, the braids falling forward over his shoulders, the tattoos on his forearms tightening as he extended one hand palm up toward me. "Choose," he said. His voice was rough, scraped bare. Not a command. A plea. The world held its breath. My ex sputtered. "This is madness," he snarled. "You debase yourself for an Omega who cannot even—" "Be silent," Michael said, without looking at him. Power thrummed in the words, making the air shiver. His eyes stayed on mine. "Talia," he said, softer now. "I will not decide your fate for you. Not with my title, not with my teeth. If you want to go with him, say the word, and I will stand aside." His throat worked. "If you do not, then end this. Not for me, for yourself." My heart hammered so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. He was giving me the one thing no one ever had, the power to choose. My ex laughed harshly. "We both know what she is," he said to the watching packs. "She is barren, broken. Do you truly think a woman like that deserves a king on his knees?" Something inside me, long buried under shame and exhaustion, snapped. I stepped forward, the stone cool beneath my feet. I turned my back on my ex and faced the circle of wolves, the elders, the moon. "My name is Talia," I said, my voice carrying in the charged silence. I was bound to him by law, but never by love. I lost 2 pups in his house. I bled alone. I was beaten with words and with silence, with doors locked and hope denied. The night he threw me into the snow, whatever thread there was between us died. I drew in a breath that tasted like iron and starlight. "I withdraw my consent," I said clearly. "Before the council, before the packs, before the moon. I reject this bond. I reject him. He is no longer my mate, nor I his Omega." The last word shook loose, something heavy inside me. It fell, hard, and did not rise again. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the moonlight intensified. It flooded the clearing, turning every edge sharp, every shadow deep. I felt it on my skin, cold and fierce, seeping through flesh and bone into the place where my wolf lived. A searing pain lanced across my chest, where an old invisible thread had once tied me to my ex-mate. It burned, then snapped. I staggered. Michael's free hand lifted, then clenched in the air, as if he were stopping himself from catching me. My ex let out a strangled sound, clutching at his own chest. The scent of singed air and something rotten briefly filled the clearing, then was gone. "The moon has heard," the elder said quietly, awe creeping into his tone. "The bond is severed." My ex stared at me, panting, disbelief twisting his features. "You cannot—" His protest cut off with a choked cry, as another sensation surged through me. Heat, not like fire, like metal poured molten into a mold that had always been waiting. It began in the center of my chest and raced outward, down my arms, up my throat. My wolf surged forward. Not in fear, but in recognition. Something answered her deeper, older, a howl without sound. Michael's hand, still held out, trembled. I took it. The moment our fingers touched, the world exploded in silver. Light flared between our joined hands, so bright it forced my eyes shut. I felt, rather than saw, the mark etch itself into my skin, a burning line, curving and twisting over the back of my hand and up my wrist, as if a claw dipped in moonlight traced its claim there. Pain and pleasure tangled, indistinguishable. When the brightness faded and I opened my eyes, I saw the mark clearly: 2 intertwined wolves, one dark, one pale, circling a crescent moon. It shimmered as if still hot, then settled into my flesh, cool and sure. Matching lines glowed on Michael's forearm, twining through the tattoos he already bore. His breath shuddered out of him. He remained on his knees, looking up at me as if I were the one crowned. The clearing was utterly silent. Then, somewhere in the ring of wolves, a voice whispered, "Mate Mark." Another answered, "The moon chose." My ex stared, face ashen, all bluster knocked clean from him. Whatever claim he had tried to assert shriveled in the face of the goddess's answer. The elder lifted his staff, voice ringing out. "The old bond is broken," he declared. "A new bond is forged. Witness, Pax of the North the moon has judged, and her mark cannot be gainsaid." The circle erupted not in chaos, but in sound. Howls rose, some joyous, some shocked, some reluctant but resigned. The air trembled with it. Through it all, Michael did not move. "Talia," he said, my name a raw exhale. I squeezed his hand, my marked skin pressing to his. "Stand," I whispered. "You are a king." His lips quirked, a broken little smile. "Not in this moment," he murmured. "In this moment, I am only a wolf who begged, and an omega who chose." Emotion burned in my throat. I tugged gently. He rose, not towering over me this time, but stepping into my space until his forehead almost touched mine. We did not kiss. Not here. Not yet. There were still eyes on us, still politics and consequences woven around this night, but his breath mingled with mine. His thumb brushed once, reverently, over the new mark on my skin. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" I asked, dazed. "For choosing yourself," he replied, "and still choosing me." The moon shone down, bright and approving, and for the first time in years, I felt something inside me answer her with no shame at all. The council's judgment came swiftly. My former husband was stripped of his rank, barred from the northern territories, and sent into exile with nothing but his horse and the clothes on his back. I watched him ride away from the keep, his shoulders hunched, and felt nothing. No victory. No vindication. Only the quiet relief of a door finally closing. Michael stood beside me at the gate, his hand warm against the small of my back. When the last shadow of my ex disappeared beyond the ridge, I turned away without a word. "It is done," Michael said softly. I nodded. It is done, but we both knew the harder work was just beginning. The first night, I could not sleep. We had been given the Alpha's chamber, our chamber now, with its enormous bed, thick furs, and fireplace that crackled softly through the dark. Michael had offered to sleep elsewhere, his voice careful, his eyes watchful. "We are bonded," I said. "The moon chose. You do not need to leave." "I know," he replied, "but you may need space." I shook my head. "I have had enough space. Stay." So he did. We lay side by side, a careful handspan between us, both staring at the ceiling. The mate mark on my wrist glowed faintly in the firelight, a reminder of what had changed. My wolf settled under my skin, content for the first time in years. But my body, my human body, still remembered old lessons. When Michael shifted in his sleep, rolling closer, his arm fell across my waist. I jerked awake with a strangled gasp, heart pounding, hands shoving at him before I even knew what I was doing. He woke instantly, pulling back, palms up. "Talia, it is me. You are safe." I sat there trembling, shame burning hot in my chest. "I know. I am sorry. Do not apologize," he said, voice rough with sleep and something gentler. "Not for this." We lay back down, farther apart this time. Neither of us slept much after that. By the third night, we had learned small things. Michael asked before touching me, even for simple gestures, a hand on my shoulder, fingers brushing my hair back from my face. At first it felt strange, formal. Then I realized what he was doing, giving me back the power to say no. And slowly, carefully, I began to say yes. Yes to his hand in mine as we walked the corridors. Yes to his arm around my waist during council meetings. A silent claim that steadied me. Yes to sitting beside him at the hearth while he read reports and I mended the pup's torn tunics. One evening, he kissed me. It was not our first kiss that had happened beneath the moon, brief and ceremonial, but this was different. We stood alone in our chamber, the fire burning low, the world quiet beyond the walls. He cupped my face in his hands, thumb brushing my cheekbone. "May I?" he asked. I nodded, throat tight. His lips met mine, soft and questioning, not demanding, not taking, just asking. My body tensed, old fear rising, but his hand stayed gentle, his mouth patient. He kissed me like I was something precious, something that might break if handled roughly. When we parted, his forehead rested against mine. "I will go as slow as you need," he murmured. Forever, if that is what it takes. Tears pricked my eyes. You would wait forever? For you? His breath hitched. Yes. That night I fell asleep with my head on his chest, listening to the steady drum of his heartbeat. When nightmares woke me, his arms tightened carefully, and his voice rumbled low, calling me back to safety. The pups noticed the change immediately. Leo burst into our chamber one morning, launching himself onto the bed with a delighted shriek. You are sleeping together now, Michael groaned, burying his face in the pillow. I laughed despite myself. Yes, Leo, I said. Mates often do. Does this mean you are our mother? He asked, eyes wide and hopeful. My breath caught. Michael's hand found mine beneath the furs, squeezing gently. If you want me to be, I said carefully. Yes, Leo crowed, bouncing. Mira, come here. We have a mother again. Mira appeared in the doorway, hesitant, her dark eyes searching my face. I held out my free hand. She crossed the room slowly, then climbed onto the bed and tucked herself against my side. Mother, she whispered, testing the word. Yes, little wolf, I murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. I am here. Michael's eyes were suspiciously bright. After that, storms brought all four of us together. Thunder would roll over the mountains, and small feet would patter down the hall. Leo would burrow between us without asking. Mira would curl at the foot of the bed, her fingers clutching the edge of my nightdress. We became a tangle of limbs and warmth, breathing in rhythm, held together by something stronger than blood. One night, weeks after the bonding, Michael woke me with a confession. We lay in the dark, the pups asleep in their own beds for once, and his voice broke the silence. When I knelt before you, he said, I thought I might die. I turned to face him. What? His jaw worked. Not from danger, from fear. Giving you that choice, watching you hold all the power, it nearly destroyed me. Not because I doubted you, because I wanted you so badly, and I had to accept that you might choose to leave. I reached up, tracing the line of his jaw, but you did it anyway. Because you deserved it, he said simply. And because a bond built on anything less than choice is a cage, not a home. Emotion swelled in my chest. I would not have stayed if you had commanded it, I admitted. I have spent too long being told what I must do. I know. He caught my hand, pressed a kiss to the mate mark on my wrist. That is why I knelt. And I would kneel 1,000 times, Talia, if it meant you stayed because you wanted to, not because you had no other choice. I kissed him then, deep and sure, and felt my wolf sing with the rightness of it. When we broke apart, breathless, he smiled a real smile, unguarded and whole. I love you, he said. I should have said it before. I love you. The words settled over me like sunlight breaking through clouds. I love you too, I whispered. And for the first time, I believed I was allowed to. Learning to be loved was harder than I expected. There were still nights I flinched, still moments I apologized for things that were not my fault. Still days the old voice whispered that I was not enough. But Michael met me in every stumble. He learned when to hold me and when to give me space. He learned that sometimes I needed words, and sometimes I only needed his presence, quiet and steady. And I learned, slowly, that love did not have to hurt, that being cherished was not the same as being owned, that I could be soft without being weak, and strong without being alone. The keep became a home, the pups became mine, and the Alpha King, fierce, powerful, feared by every pack in the north, became the man who kissed my forehead each morning and whispered, "Thank you for staying," as if I were the gift, not him. Spring arrived slowly in the north, melting snow into rushing streams, coaxing green from the frozen earth. By the time summer warmed the stone walls of the keep, I no longer flinched when council members addressed me as my queen. Michael had insisted on it from the first gathering after our bonding. When an elder referred to me as the Alpha's Omega, Michael's voice cut through the hall like a blade. You will address her as Queen Talia, he said, or you will leave my council. The room fell silent. Then, one by one, they bowed their heads. Yes, my king. Forgive us, my queen. I learned quickly that being queen meant more than sitting beside Michael at feasts. It meant power and the responsibility to wield it well. The first law we changed together concerned bonding rights. I stood before the council, hands steady despite the old fear curling in my belly, and spoke the words I had written by candlelight the night before. No Omega will be forced into a bond without clear, witnessed consent, I said. No Omega will be cast out for failing to bear young, and any mate who uses cruelty, physical or otherwise, forfeits their claim. Murmurs rippled through the gathered wolves. Some nodded, others frowned. One elder spoke up. "This could destabilize pack structures, my queen." "Tradition, tradition," I interrupted gently. "Protected my abuser and nearly killed me. If our traditions do that, they are worth changing." Michael's hand found mine under the table, squeezing once. The laws passed. Word spread through the territories. Omegas began coming to the keep, some asking for asylum, others simply seeking counsel. I met with them in a small chamber overlooking the valley, listening to stories that echoed my own. Each time, I offered what I had been given: choice, safety, and the knowledge that their worth was not measured by their wombs. Some nights, the weight of it pressed down on me. I would wake, gasping, certain that it had all been a dream, that I would open my eyes and find myself back in that cold house, back under his roof. But then Michael's arms would fold around me, careful and sure. "You are here," he would murmur into my hair. "You are safe. You are mine, and I am yours, and no one will take that away." And the pups, our pups now, would shuffle in, drawn by some instinct that told them I needed them. Leo would press his warm little body against my side. Mira would slip her hand into mine and hum the lullaby I had taught her. Slowly, my breathing would even. The nightmare would fade. I was not alone anymore. By autumn, the North had changed in small, vital ways. Omegas could own land. They could dissolve bonds that brought them harm. They could speak in council, their voices carrying the same weight as any other wolf. It was not perfect. There were still those who grumbled, who clung to old ways. But change had begun, and it carried my name. One crisp morning, Michael found me in our chamber, staring out the window at the mountains beyond. "What are you thinking?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "I want to go back," I said quietly. He stiffened. "Back where?" "To the crossroads, where you found me." He was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded against my hair. "Then we will go." We rode out that afternoon, Michael and I, Leo and Mira, with Vin and a small escort trailing behind. The road unwound before us, familiar and strange all at once. The trees had turned gold and crimson, their leaves drifting down like embers. When we reached the crossroads, I dismounted slowly. The old wooden shelter still stood, weathered and crooked, its bench split and worn. The torch post had rusted. Snow would come soon, piling in the same drifts that had nearly buried me. I walked to the bench and sat down. The wood was cold beneath me. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I was her again, broken, hollow, ready to surrender. I felt the weight of my mother's ring in my hand, the sting of frost on my bare feet, the certainty that no one would come. Then small hands tugged at my cloak. "Mother?" Leo's voice bright and worried. "Why are you sad?" I opened my eyes. He stood before me, Mira beside him, both bundled in furs, their cheeks flushed from the ride. "I am not sad, little wolf," I said, pulling him close. "I am remembering." "Remembering what?" Mira asked softly. "The night your father found me." Michael stepped forward, his shadow falling over us. He knelt, just as he had beneath the moon, and took my hands in his. "I see her sometimes," he said quietly. "The woman who sat here. When I look at you now, strong, fierce, loved, I can hardly believe she is the same person." "She is not," I whispered. "You gave me the chance to become someone new." He shook his head. "No, you were always this person. I only gave you a place safe enough to remember it." Tears blurred my vision. He lifted my hand to his lips and kissed my knuckles, his mouth warm against the knot mark that circled my wrist. "Never again," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You will never be cold, or cast out, or made to feel worthless. Not while I draw breath." For the first time, I believed him completely. I stood, pulling him up with me, and wrapped my arms around his neck. Our children pressed close, Leo giggling, Mira smiling her rare, precious smile. "Take me home," I whispered against Michael's chest. "You are home," he murmured back. "Wherever we stand together, that is home." We rode away from the crossroads as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. I did not look back. The woman who had waited on that bench to die was gone. In her place was a queen, a mother, a mate, a wolf who had learned that survival was only the beginning, and that healing could be a kind of victory all its own. If this story touched your heart, I want you to know you are not alone. Whether you are sitting on your own crossroads right now, or you know someone who is, please hear this. Your worth is not tied to what others could not see in you. You are not broken. You are not too much or too little. You are enough, exactly as you are. And if you need to hear it today, it is okay to choose yourself. It is okay to walk away. It is okay to believe that you deserve warmth, safety, and love that does not come with conditions. Healing is possible. Home is possible. You just have to take the first step. Tell me, where are you watching from today? And if you or someone you love has walked this road, know that your courage matters. Your story matters. You matter. Thank you for being here.